Thank you so much. I'm really glad to see this full room. Guys, I'm really happy to see you. Just for those who don't know me, Lyudmyla Kozlovska, Open Dialogue Foundation, Bitcoin advocate, human rights defender. We use Bitcoin for human rights, and this is our main tool how we, right now, actually able to deliver humanitarian aid or protect human rights. And I'm really honored to have this distinguished panelists who will discuss with me how we actually gonna respond to this bureaucracy, how Bitcoin is interacting with bureaucracy, how we're gonna to deal with regulation, with this total control going on us, and especially CBDC threats. And I'm glad to give introduction call for our panelists. Let's start. Chris, from you.
Hi, so I'm Chris. I lead in Spain law firm very focused on Bitcoin-based companies and the crypto asset markets. And as they said when I was presented, I've been working with several regulatory groups from 2018 to now, since 2018. One of them was the working group that did MiCA, and I think I'm sort of a lobbyist, but I'm a Bitcoiner, so I just try to help regulators write down rules that make some sense. Nevertheless, I'm super CBDC contrarian.
Perfect. Štěpán.
Hello everyone, I'm Štěpán, and when I was asked to join this panel, I was thinking, well, this is amazing, because this is the story of ours. So in 2013, we founded the first hardware wallet in the world with a clear mission, and it was to allow self-custody to everyone, because from our perspective, that's the foundation of Bitcoin, to have the right to own something without permission, without asking anyone. And so we've been here since 2013, and after long years, we realized the game is changing. And so 5 years ago, we founded a sister company to mitigate the upcoming regulation and legal risks. So right now, we have basically two bases, and it means self-custody, and our mission is to protect the self-custody, so this area is not regulated at all, so it's the right of people who owns Bitcoin, but at the same time, we want to go beyond the regulation and be sure that we can provide great services. So currently, we have in the both areas, and we will discuss in this panel.
Thank you, and these guys we have to protect, so they actually can invent. So, Brandon, what about you?
Brandon Karpelès, the CEO of Sovereign. We launched this year, and we are helping onboard, educate, integrate Bitcoin into companies to help them utilize it as a payment source, a long-term capital asset. I came from the corporate finance world, which is arguably even more bureaucratic than the actual government itself, and spent 20 years in that world navigating that system. And there was a lot of fear in that world about the regulations, certainly up until maybe the end of last year, beginning of this year, as people are starting to take a different look at things, but there is a lot of fear amongst corporate leaders, people in businesses about what it could potentially do to their companies, and even the threat of litigation, enforcement, or anything like that puts a serious damper on the ability for companies to adopt Bitcoin and integrate it into their businesses.
Hi, I'm Zach Harvey, co-founder of Lamasu. We started building Bitcoin ATMs in early 2013 and built the first ones. And like Trezor, the idea was able to help people with self-custody, with us not through securing it, but enabling people to buy Bitcoin in a very quick way. Our original motto was cash to Bitcoin in 15 seconds, which was the case in 2013, less so right now thanks to regulation. But the idea is you just use cash, you bypass the banks, and you're able to get it directly to your self-custodial wallet. And that has been our idea in the beginning. It was always more difficult to get Bitcoin, especially for smaller amounts, with going through all of the exchanges and signing up to banks. And with us, it was always just this direct thing. And I just want to, since this is a panel about regulation, I want to make one note, which is that us as businesses, like Lamasu, like Trezor, are always going to face regulation, and even more so the ones that actually touch the finance side of it. But Bitcoin itself cannot be regulated. And it is designed to be ban-proof from government, and that's the only reason it currently exists. Governments, anything similar that wasn't properly decentralized, whether it's e-gold, Liberty Dollar, or PayPal that is now a castrated form of its original form, which planned to be money, they can all be regulated and all were regulated away from being a money. But when you use Bitcoin in a decentralized manner, you're not regulated. And there's no way to regulate the individual users. So as much as possible, keep Bitcoin decentralized and use it that way, and you don't have to worry about regulation. That's what it's designed for. And for us as the businesses, that's a lot harder, and we're always going to have to make compromises to stay out of trouble.
You did amazing point, and I will get back right away to you, because Bitcoin ATM played crucial, I would say historical role for many Ukrainians. For myself as human rights defender who was financially excluded because of authoritarian attacks and transnational repression since 2018. Right now, with this regulatory environment, what we have in Europe, I would not be able to use your ATM machine anymore in Brussels. Nobody would be able to give me this lifeline. Ukrainians who were facing invasion of Russia would not be able to rescue their funds. So can you explain us, because it's different right now situation with regulation in US and different situation in EU, where we are right now, why we came to this point, what was done in benefit of industry from Bitcoin community, and was actually harmed while we were advocating for it?
Yeah, so as I said, a lot has changed since 2013. In the early days, there was nothing really clear about Bitcoin ATMs. In fact, Bitcoin ATMs were actually relatively late to the US because people were so fearful of what would happen if they'd actually start one. And in Europe, there was always something they were waiting for, whether it's like, wait, is there VAT? Do we have to charge VAT on Bitcoin or not? And so we always had what we call our operators are the ones that buy our Bitcoin ATMs, and they're the ones that actually operate them. We had operators throughout Europe, which is like, listen, we want to buy more machines, but we can't because we're waiting for for the European Union to decide, for example, if there's VAT on Bitcoin or not. And then the next stage is like, well, we want to buy more Bitcoin ATMs, but we don't know if it's, exactly what the AML KYC is on it right now. And as it went forward, what we saw was more of a consolidation. This especially started around 2017. More and more of a consolidation of Bitcoin ATM operators, pulling away from all the small ones that would open up in like little cafes or libertarian bookstores or that sort of thing. Or just somebody said, you know what, I want to put a Bitcoin ATM here to make it available to people. All of a sudden they had to worry about going to jail, say in the US, or having their machines confiscated in Germany or other places in Europe, or France, for example. And what would happen is because the more regulation came out, the more regulatory capture you'd have. And so Bitcoin ATM manufacturers and developers softwares had to make a decision. Do we want to keep this more cypherpunk, or do we want this to be a business where we can have hundreds or thousands of machines? And what ended up happening is it went more towards the let's have thousands of machines. So I think now in the world there's somewhere around 35,000 Bitcoin ATMs, which is a great number. But it's in the hands of a lot smaller number of operators, some of them with 4,000 or 5,000 machines, and they're always going to optimize for regulation because that keeps the small players out. The small players can't compete, and there have been some bad actors in the space as well who have actually reported other operators to the authorities so that they would get kicked out and they'd be able to have cleaner competition, not having to worry about more pesky operators competing with them.
This sounds crazy, but I can confirm, because when we were doing advocacy in Europe against very repressive language towards to privacy instruments, especially to crypto assets and P2P transactions from the side of anti-money laundering regulation, like there was nobody from industry who was supporting our messages, and this is something super sad. We also heard stories that lawyers from industry, they were supporting this kind of pro strong regulation even more. Maybe Chris, you can also elaborate a little bit about it. What is your perspective?
So I totally agree with you, Zach. So I've been in the space since 2014. My first clients were Bitcoin-based companies, no regulatory framework, not in Europe, not in Spain. So our approach has always been common sense, and doing things by the rule the best that we can, reducing regulatory risk. Now, I want to say something, and this is something that maybe is not super popular, but I've not been the most popular lawyer in the space for the last year, so that's that. And this is that there's a very, very special figure in the space that are profiles that can understand perfectly the regulatory framework, but still think that there's a chance to do the revolution using rules against the system. An example. I guess we all are common to the travel rule, the transfer of funds regulation. When this regulation was being negotiated in the European Union, there was a guy who proposed banning self-hosted wallets. Do you know which nationality this politician had? Spanish, right? So, and do you know why this proposal was taken down? Because there was a group of lawyers who understood the space and the regulation and made this group understand that banning technology was just crazy, that it would be taken to the courts and that it would be taken down finally. And the proposal was then just taken away from the transfer of fund regulation. What I'm trying to say with this is that I've never believed that it is with us or against us lawyers. I think there's a chance that we can actually get Bitcoin to be protected, and I'm super, super, super on the point that Bitcoin used in decentralized manners is absolutely non-regulated and cannot be regulated. And that's the best thing. And I've always said, I've got a sentence that I always say, and this is that, for me, Bitcoin is the best example of legal hacking that we've had in history. That's why I love it so much. For the rest, I think that lawyers who understand and embrace the technology and the users of Bitcoin should go together. I really believe they should go together, and that's the reason for which I've been doing lobby from my position.
Perfect. And now, Brandon, you know actually perfectly situation from both sides, from inside of bureaucracy, corporate life, and right now in Europe is discussion how to bring this competitiveness to our markets. It's a completely different situation in US. So how Bitcoin actually can embrace competitiveness, how AML regulation undermine competitiveness, can you elaborate on it, please?
In my opinion, I think now as the proliferation of companies in the Bitcoin space continues to grow and grow and grow, people need to get together, people need to meet at events like this, people need to meet at conferences and start to form little groups, little communities, coalitions, and start getting together, start talking with people. You know, we had a perfect example with all of the stuff that happened with lockdowns and a lot of the BLM stuff in the United States, where individuals were really scared to speak out. And that's why it looked like everyone had the exact same playbook, because no individual wanted to stand up and be the guy in that meme that's got his hand up while everyone's sitting down. But there were lots of people who felt the same way. And if there was a community in place where 100 leaders of companies, 100 CEOs of public companies were able to come out and say, we're not going to deal with this insanity. We're taking a stand against this. We're going to push back against this. And we're going to make it known that we're not on board with this. The regulators thrive on making you as the leader of a company or as an individual feel like you're alone. And the best thing you can do is make sure you know you're not alone. Align yourself with others. You know, Štěpán and I should be exchanging information after this. And hey, maybe something else that's going to come down the line, and you know 3 people and I know 4 people, and we're going to get together the next time something crazy like this comes down or they try to shove something down our throats, and we're going to stand up and say we're not going to take this. We're going to push back against this. We're going to employ people like Cristina on our behalf to go fight this stuff. And not only are you stronger, you know, Bitcoin is decentralized, we should have a decentralized network of leaders, of companies, and of businesses, and of communities as well to push back against all this stuff. Bitcoin is not censorable. It is successful for all the reasons that have been talked about up here because it's decentralized. Well, let's do the same with our communities, our groups, our advocacy, and our pushing back against a lot of the crazy stuff they're trying to shove down our throats.
Thank you. And Štěpán, you did this, I would say, unbelievable for Europe effort, because from one side you are self-custody wallet, from other side you have this experience in a license also functioning in Europe. What's your experience fighting or facing DORA, MiCA, AML regulation? What you have done actually to protect your infrastructure, your team, operation in Europe? How you see the difference? It's on EU level, on national states level. Can you share with us, please?
Absolutely. So first of all, it's a completely new experience for us, and personally, I have been having nightmares since then. So first of all, it's all about strategy. So for Trezor company, it's very clear, and we try to strictly distinguish between self-custody as a technology and between any services or financial services, crypto services within the environment. So we really do our best to sell hardware wallets as a neutral technology for everyone, so there is no space for any regulation. And as Cristina already said, it's a very dangerous game because we've seen some voices telling, hey, self-custody is a technology we should regulate because only criminals use self-custody. Why would you self-custody? Do you have something to hide? And I think this is extremely dangerous, so we must do our best to defend this space. Now let's move on into the service or financial services providers. And here we have a very new experience with the MiCA, but as you've mentioned, and for those who are not familiar with the regulation, it's not only about the MiCA, so about the financial services. There's something called DORA, so it's a directive on operational resistance. And this regulation was originally meant for banks, so for huge institutions with huge financial resources. Now, it's applied on the crypto asset services providers. So it's all of us. And so my first idea here is that this is going to kill a lot of small companies, like individuals who are eager to do something for the Bitcoin, who are eager to build businesses, and who just need time to become a medium company or even a large company. So that's the first point. Then the second point is that when we reached out to the regulator, and we have experience from Lithuania, from Czech Republic, and from Germany, and it turned out that even though European Union is one space, it really depends in which country you want to apply for the regulation, for the license, I mean the MiCA license, and it really matters. And in our case, here in Czech Republic, so we had several talks, or we've been having these talks with the national bank since January this year, and they told us very strictly and clearly, so guys, what is going to happen is that if you don't have at least 10 to 15 employees only on the compliance, anti-money laundering, and this kind of stuff, don't even try to apply. Plus, if you don't have at least 1 or better 2 million euros in the financial assets, don't even try to apply for this license, not at all. So this was the kind of reality we face right now. So I think it's going to kill a lot of businesses, small businesses, even medium one. It's going to be super slow. So at least we, from our experience in Czech Republic, we are going to apply for the license, and we don't know at which future the regulator will decide. So they told us it's going to be maybe a year and a half. So this is the real problem we face right now.
Cristina, Chris, I have a question for you. Are regulators bad guys? Why they so much focus on privacy, on Bitcoin? Why all this old madness? You as a person from this bubble, you used to have experience with European Commission, working closely to the government representatives. What's going on? Can you explain us how we can deal with it?
So we were speaking yesterday, and I stand at the point where I don't want to think that regulators are bad guys, per se. But I think there are certain things that we need to bear in mind. The first thing is that I've seen a growing fear from politicians to Bitcoin. And this is super clear when you're now seeing these, I call them Frankenstein regulations, where On the one side, they're constantly telling you Bitcoin is not a means of payment, and there you're suddenly seeing MiCA crypto asset service providers are gonna need to comply with the payment services directive because they're gonna be payment processors. How can it be if Bitcoin is not a means of payment? This sort of Frankenstein regulations usually happen because regulators don't truly understand what they're regulating. And when they don't understand what they're regulating, usually they tend to over-regulate. DORA is a super example. I'm now doing around 5 to 6 MiCA authorizations, and I can tell you it's taking me, I would say, 3 or 4 times more nailing down the DORA documents than the proper MiCA authorization. That makes no sense. No sense at all. But the thing is that not even regulators understand DORA. What have they done? Over-regulated. There are certain things in DORA that make no sense for a CUSP, no sense whatsoever. So what I tend to think is that regulators are not the bad guys, but one, regulations are very poorly designed. Incentives in regulations are very poorly designed as well. The second thing is that usually regulations are designed by politicians. That's the worst idea that can happen to any sort of country. And the third one is, and you've just said it, that it depends on the guys that are going to apply a regulation. I'm constantly seeing clients saying, we're asking for a MiCA authorization somewhere in the European Union because those regulators understand, are flexible, have their criteria, blah, 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 blah. Okay. But when it comes to regulators who have fear and don't understand what they're applying, what you usually see is regulators saying to you, I don't know when I'm going to make a decision. If you don't have 15 guys on compliance, blah, 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 which is not the best case scenario. So I would say that we really need to think deeply on the way we design, or they design regulations. Because, I mean, a lot of people have the sense that Europe is over-regulating. I'm the first one. It makes no sense. I really hope that this competitive compass that is now being executed in the European Union...
Showing directions. Yeah. Compass showing only one direction. Have you guys seen competitive compass in EU? It shows so many directions. It shows actually how EU is not able to approach it at all.
I would like one direction, that's reducing red tape.
Yeah. Brandon, we were speaking together with you about the need of education, about the need to how to address this bureaucracy, how to address with unexpected allies, for example, CBDC threats. Like you were saying that we can have even banks in our allies. How it's possible? How we can actually play with this?
Well, maybe not banks.
Should we afraid CBDC or should we build something new?
No, in all seriousness, there are many people, not just Bitcoiners, not just Bitcoin companies, that would like to see regulation rolled back. And it's hurting all forms of businesses. It hurts someone making auto parts. It hurts a law firm. It hurts everyone. Well, maybe not a law firm. They actually probably benefit a lot. But that was a terrible example. But pretty much any business out there actually making something, actually providing something, even to start a business, Sovereign, the business I'm helping get off the ground here, the amount of forms that have had to have been filled out, just stupid documents submitted, license fees paid, permits paid, and this is in the United States, in the state of Wyoming, and one of the easier places to get a business off the ground, and it's just stifling, and it's not felt only by people in the Bitcoin community, it's felt by all owners, all operators of companies, and you should be strategic with who you may want to reach out to as you start trying to push back against some of this stuff, as there is the ultimate call to, again, be decentralized, find your allies, and it doesn't have to be just within the Bitcoin community. It can be in all sorts of businesses. It can be in nonprofits. It could be in, even within regulatory agencies. I think the regulatory folks are a little more nefarious than Cristina did, but that being said, there are some people within that space that actually think they're doing a good job, want to do a good job, think they're being reasonable, and take allies wherever you can find them and get together and make it your initiative to begin to chip away at some of these things or push for overhauls. I mean, I think we've seen in the United States that if you are on the right side of things, get yourself embedded in the whatever administration or whatever group, you can get a lot of stuff done. Now, should a system work that way? Absolutely not. And should it be pay to play or favors, scratch my back, scratch your back? No, but that's the unfortunate reality of the world. And I think a lot of people in the Bitcoin space have figured out that, okay, well, you're just going to punish us, well, we're going to play that game too. And there's opportunities to be ethical and have integrity, but also get into that system and start making changes and start growing your network of people that would be willing to push for those changes without being a bad actor or, you know, dropping sacks of cash under a table to get something done.
Zach and Stefan, I would have next questions for you, because you have actually two different experience in two different jurisdictions, and Zach, you actually have in many jurisdictions experience. We see in US kind of praise and more pro-Bitcoin environment, while in the EU we have just recently discussed the new idea how to so-called temporarily ban Bitcoin mining. Or, for example, next week in European Parliament, European Central Bank is going to explain why crypto assets, namely Bitcoin and its privacy payment instruments, ATM, of course, is represent threat to financial integrity and stability. So how are we going to deal with it? Do we need to address the threat to CBDC? Do we need to address this actually language? How we can manage this different language in both major Western civilization jurisdictions to make positive effect for customers, for industry, for those who facilitate Bitcoin transactions, for example, in authoritarian states, for activists like us. So what we can do, how we can look into this perspective from your experience and what could be done?
Yeah, so first of all, when it comes to CBDCs, it's very hard to know exactly what they are and what people plan to do with them. And so there are a few possibilities. One is that a CBDC is basically just a government stablecoin on ERC20 or something, and they just put it out there and say, look, we've come up with a stablecoin. And then obviously nobody will use it because they can't compete with the free market. So it's not much of competition there. They're obviously not going to start a permissionless and immutable cryptocurrency that they just put out there, because that's exactly what they're fighting against, and there's no way they can compete with Bitcoin. So CBDCs aren't competition neither to Bitcoin or any other kind of stable coin, for example. Now, what they could say is, hey, we've designed an app, and this app has its own centralized token, and it's either mandatory or it's voluntary. If it's voluntary, nobody will use it. And if it's mandatory, then they might intend it as since it can't compete with Bitcoin or with stable coins, the only thing that would make sense to me is would be competing more with cash. And now they're saying, listen, we've finally given you this financial inclusion. Of course, that same financial inclusion that they've kept from everyone with their own regulation. But here you go, we have a CBDC for you. Everybody can have it. You don't need cash anymore. And so I think that's obviously the danger of the CBDC, because that gets us closer and closer to the social credit system. It's like, oh, you didn't get your COVID vaccine, you don't have access to your CBDCs anymore. You don't have a valid driver's license or ID, you can't do this. You can't fly right now because you don't have, you know, the valid means of payment for this, and you need it in some sort. And so that's the question about CBDCs. I can tell you that we have no intention of putting CBDCs on our Bitcoin ATMs. And no, I mean, I can't do much about CBDCs in the same way that I can't do too much about the government printing money. You know, Lamassu is not acting in any way to stop central banks from printing money. What we're trying to do is help people have access to a better form of money. And I think that that is, as far as our company is concerned, that's what we want to keep on doing, make it easier and easier for more and more people to have easy and immediate access to Bitcoin, and especially when you don't have to use banks at all to do it. You just, whatever cash you have, you go up to a Bitcoin ATM, and on the spot you have your Bitcoin. And so that's just as far as that's concerned. I think as far as like the US getting more popular with the politicians, obviously some great lobbying work has been done by Coin Center and others to really push that forward. And I personally am in awe and I'm very impressed. And I'm really glad that the government in the US says they're going to attack Bitcoin less now. I think that's a good thing. In Europe, that doesn't exist as much. But in general, I think that regulation is always a form of protectionism, perhaps disguised as concern, right? And it's a lot easier for regulators to deal with a few small actors that they can control that benefits both sides than to have a huge decentralized free market which they have no chance of controlling. And so it's built into the system with regulation. And just a last point I want to make, there are two very useful metrics in the pharmaceutical world that are useful trying to see if drugs are useful or have benefit. One is NNT, which is number needed to treat. So for example, if it's a beta blocker and its NNT is 100, that means 100 people have to take the medicine in order for one person to benefit. And the other one is something called all-cause mortality, meaning of all the medicines that you take, will it actually prolong your life or just means you'll die some other way from taking this, even if it has a benefit for a specific thing? Those things should be considered and talked about a lot throughout all of the regulatory subjects. So whether it's agriculture, medicine, finance, energy, Bitcoin, we should always be looking and every time we want to think, is this good regulation? Well, how many people is it going to harm? What's the actual benefit from everyone that this is applied to? And I think you'll see in everything that definitely applies to Bitcoin and probably everything else as well, there is no real benefit to these regulations. It is just oppressing the individual user in order for the politicians to have easier control over what's happening.
Thank you. And Stefan, I would like to give you the opportunity to close our panel because we have just a few minutes left, but it's super important to say how we in Europe going to respond for all of these growing threats. We have, from one side, CBDC threats, from other sides, we have AML overregulation, ESG overregulation, we have growing threats to communication, and right now is going to be introduced a specific demand to have ID registration in messengers. So what are we going to do with it?
You have mentioned all the riders of apocalypse, and so let's start locally. And let me share an experience from Czech Republic. So 2 years ago, the Bitcoin community here in the Czech Republic decided to invest enormous amount of energy and time to educate people who are in the government and to advocate for Bitcoin. And last year, it's like 7 months ago, the government successfully passed a bill which created a much better environment for Bitcoin here locally in Czech Republic. And now the surprise. So no matter what the political party, everyone was for, 0 against. So I think this was a great success on the local level, and it was very honestly a moment even I realized, okay, there is something we can do about it, and we cannot pretend that this is not about us. Personally, I hate it because we joined Bitcoin to create great products and to create Bitcoin better. So I'm not a professional lobbyist, but I can imagine that the thing we must do as a community, as the businesses in this environment, is to think how to do it in a smart way. So, for example, with the CBDC, I was surprised that one of the biggest lobbyists out there are the banks. So this is someone who is really strongly against the CBDC, and this is someone who can actually help us or we can join with. And I think this is the same with any other subjects or topics. So this is kind of my message. Let's start locally, but let's realize that those who are big businesses or even medium ones must invest not only the financial resources, but maybe just time and energy to do the environment better, because if not we, well, there's no one who will do that. And as was mentioned, I'm afraid that these people don't understand Bitcoin. They don't understand what will happen, and what's even worse, they think that they are doing the world a better place, and that's not true. So this is my take.
Amazing. We have 1 minute left. Chris and Brandon, what you would like to say, your call to action for audience?
Štěpán said it perfectly. Start small, start locally, find people you can align with. sometimes, I mean, this is a war. It's a regulatory war, and war has strange bedfellows, as the saying goes. So find your bedfellows. You may not agree with them on 100%, but if you've been around Bitcoin at all, there's not one Bitcoiner who agrees with you on 100% of anything. So consider the same thing as you're trying to find allies and advocates as you go to attack the beast.
Thank you. Chris?
Lastly, I would just say it's time to organize ourselves. We've got different profiles, different talents. If we get coordinated, we can get results.
Let's do it, Europe. Thank you.
LFG.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Secure your BTC Prague 2026 ticket at the lowest possible price now.